Hey guys, welcome to Midweek. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully it will help with your small group or just with the other people you're watching this video for Midweek this week. As you guys know, we are continuing on this idea and series on one another relationships. We figure because of what's going on in our country right now, that we would need to focus on how we relate to one another and the important parts of our relationships with one another from a biblical standpoint. So today we're going to be looking at two key aspects of one another relationships, which is the idea of love and acceptance. Now, you may be thinking these are really basic things. Of course, we understand what these are, and maybe you are masters at these things. But sometimes it can be good to go back to basics and even just check in on people, and for us to go back to the scriptures and see what Jesus really expected of us in these two things with each other and the people around us. So we're going to look at a couple scriptures, but really we're going to camp out on Luke chapter 18, verses 9 through 14. So the first scripture, though, just as a basic level of understanding of why this topic is important, is John chapter 13, verses 34 through 35. It says here, "A new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must also love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." I think this is just a good baseline understanding of what it is that Jesus wanted us to focus on, is that our idea of love comes from him. The second scripture that we'll really kind of dive into is Luke chapter 18. It says here in Luke chapter 18, verses 9 through 14, "To some who are confident of their own righteousness and look down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, 'God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, and adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all I get.' But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, 'God, have mercy on me, a sinner.' I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." We model our love and our understanding of love not based on movies or songs or even past experiences. We practice and model our love based on Jesus' life and teaching. In fact, it's so important for us to do this that this is the defining factor to help people know that we are actually disciples and followers of Jesus. However, it's a high calling, right? Part of love and what we've read earlier is the ability that we have to accept each other. Acceptance is an incredibly difficult concept for us as humans. We naturally carry grudges and harbor feelings when people let us down or hurt us. We can be extraordinarily judgmental, as Jesus says. This is not just a battle between spiritual people, non-spiritual people, disciples and not, which is valid, but it's very much a problem we can even have with other disciples we have in our small groups and close spiritual relationships. As I've been talking with other people about their understanding, for them, acceptance is understanding other people's realities, even if it has nothing to do with you, with the intention of being unified, right? The idea that, God made people with equal value. And, as Christians, we have to be able to see the value that everyone has and accept that. I was really inspired by someone in our small group, and what they had said was that they had a hard time understanding just having a hard time having grace with the people in their family. But what was crazy to them was that, they realized that if God was willing to forgive them, then they would have to be willing to forgive them as well. Right? That if God was willing to give, this person who was just doing really hurtful things to them, an opportunity for forgiveness, they should do the same thing. And, maybe this is a good time for us to evaluate where we are with our spiritual relationships and the people that we're close to. Maybe someone in your small group struggles with their mental health. And I know for a lot of people, mental health is not something that people have talked about, really, or even understood. And this has been a trying time for them. Maybe you yourself have never struggled with your mental health, but since the start of COVID, maybe you have started, right? When we hear people talk about things that cause them struggle and pain, what attitude do we have? I think it's a good reality check for us to figure out our attitudes when people tell us something that maybe we don't necessarily understand or even agree with, right? Are we looking down on those we have judged to be less spiritual or too spiritual, right? That, both ends of the spectrum are not good. Obviously, we talk about this almost every week, but the reality is true. We can't just ignore what's going on in our country. Maybe the topic of race and America has been an issue to you and your group. I think no matter what it is that we necessarily feel about these topics, our posture and our understanding should come from Jesus, right? And not to say that we shouldn't do anything or we should do too much of something, but I think the question is in our relationships with one another, are we viewing each other the way that Jesus views us, right? Do we see ourselves as extending an arm of forgiveness and seeing the hearts of people, or do we just see these static things that the Pharisees see, and in turn become incredibly judgmental? I see the point that Jesus was making with this parable in Luke 18 as a pointed challenge to those who can be self-righteous and selfish. A temptation that comes for all of us. Our small groups or other spiritual relationships, the church, it should be places for us to be safe and listened to. Now, this doesn't mean that we can just allow people to say or do whatever they want, but we have to be patient with one another and humble enough to listen. I have to fight almost every day the idea and the feeling that I'm right all the time, like as in right about everything. I have to be humble to the possibility that I'm wrong and open to the consequences that come with that. You can ask Lauren. We have many arguments about many things, and I think it's, for me at least, there are a lot of really humble people out there. I would not necessarily consider myself to be naturally humble, and I think what I've seen, though, is that this actually hurts people that I care about, right? When I choose to hold on to what I believe and not accept that I'm wrong or not accept that I've hurt somebody, even if I was right, I've seen that actually really damages people. It damages relationships unnecessarily, right? Because is winning an argument worth hurting someone you love, right? Is standing up for what, you believe is the right American thing, a reason to really hurt somebody who is feeling genuine pain. And, maybe, these are just some ideas, but maybe the COVID thing isn't as bad nationally as it seems in the media. But that does not mean that it is not a big deal to people individually, right? Maybe this race stuff, is overblown and people are just upset. But maybe this race stuff is actually a matter of life and death for some brothers and sisters in the church, and impacts in their jobs and relationships in their lives. I have to fight to be humble because that's what Jesus showed, right? He listened and cared about all the kinds of people that would eventually betray him. He was able to make women with horrible reputations feel safe, sinners feel heard, and the sick feel taken care of. What we do know, and what the scriptures say, is that we have to humble ourselves. And in that we will be exalted. And I've found that that's the case, right? No matter what my opinions are about things and, however I may judge people, I know that if I'm able to just sit back and listen to people and help them beyond just this argument, but really seeing where they are in their hearts and listening to them, then I've realized that I can make a connection that's deeper than just a right or a wrong. This idea of acceptance is difficult, but I thought that this might be helpful. This idea is, the way that I think Jesus saw this is he saw the crowds never as just the crowds, but he saw them as individual people. He was able to see that these are actual people that are being impacted by this life of sin, by the things that he's seen. I think for us, we have to be able to do that as well. We can't just look at people or look at statistics and we can get so obsessed about the facts and the figures when really we have to be looking deeper into each other individually and say, okay, what can I do to help, and what are these things that we need to figure out between us so that we can be connected. And honestly, I'm sure everyone will say the way that quarantine and all these things have happened have affected us pretty deeply. We have to have each other, and we have to have great relationships with one another, because it's hard enough as it is. to do it alone. And if the people in the church around us aren't really diving in deep, we're even worse off. You know, I just wanted to kind of end off here with some practicals and thoughts that we've had since being a part of a small group. Lauren and I just moved here, and we're part of this great small group. But I think obviously, you know, you're starting a small group with a place you've never been to, and you're starting new, and our situation is starting new. Maybe you've been with your small group for years and years, and, you know, none of these things will apply to you. But maybe there's some nuggets you can take out of this is, you know, we've had our fair share of learning about how to really have impactful Zoom conversations. I will be honest with you and say not all of them have been great. Not as a product of leadership or a problem of that, but it takes getting used to this kind of new method of connecting. And, you know, I just figured I'd add on to what John said last week. You know, what's really helped us is breaking up into smaller groups so that we can actually have discussions. But I would actually like to add another practical to that, is really making a focused effort into talking about you or your family or you and your spouse, not just in generalities, right? Instead of saying, I think being accepted is important as an answer to a reflection question, maybe a shift to something like this where you say, being accepted is important to me because blank. Right, this helps make the topics we're talking about, you know, of one another relationships really hit home on a personal level instead of just being an intellectual discussion. If we're talking about something more challenging, like how we struggle to show love, sharing, you know, from a personal perspective has been really helpful in bonding us together with people in our small group, you know. So shout out to the Young Marrieds Northside group. You know, I think when people share personally and vulnerably, it really helps to get into deeper waters. So that being said, and hopefully you've been able to get some great stuff out of this, and even if not, that scripture in Luke 18 will convict you even without any of my thoughts from it. I really hope that this is helpful to you in understanding the perspective that we have on acceptance in our small groups and even amongst each other, is that we don't necessarily just look and focus on the arguments and the discussions we have, but we actually look deeper into seeing the people, seeing how Jesus actually saw, you know, the tax collector in his humility. Even though on the outside it may not seem like there's anything going on that's righteous, he was able to see what the real heart was. And in our relationships, you know, with our spouses, with our friends, with our small groups, we have to have that same level of acceptance, but we have to know each other well enough to be able to have that. So I have a couple of questions that might be helpful for you guys to kind of move forward in your discussion after watching this video. I will also, at the description of this video, will also be these questions as well for you to look at. The first question is this: what are some things that help you feel loved by the people in your small group? So just like I said, on a personal level. The second question is, for you, what can make you feel like you are not accepted, right, by your family, spouse, small group, friends? And the third thing is, you know, in what ways do we see that other people, when they have chosen to love and accept us, how that has impacted our lives? So really, it'd be a great opportunity to share some moments in your life where you feel like someone has made an incredible effort to listen and accept you for where you're at. And in sharing those things, it really helps people understand the value of it. So those are 3 questions. Hopefully you guys will have a great small groups. Thank you again for taking the time to listen and watch. I pray that you guys are healthy and well. Love you guys.